actually you can. Go ahead and create the impossible. Ian Faison would know. He's proving it, one groundbreaking show at a time. As the founder and CEO of Caspian Studios, Ian isn't just rewriting the playbook for B2B content marketing. He's inventing an entirely new game. Fiction podcasts for B2B brands. Yes, you heard that right. While most companies are still cranking out white papers and webinar decks, Ian is creating immersive, blockbuster-style fiction podcasts, people. All are just so engaging, and they're bringing in hundreds of thousands of listeners. They're winning awards. Think true crime thrillers and HR murder mysteries made not for Hollywood, but for the B2B world, but still bringing in Hollywood actors. You guys, it's pretty incredible. It's an idea that nearly everyone said was impossible or unnecessary, sometimes even silly, but Ian, he saw something that no one else did. The power of storytelling to make B2B marketing genuinely captivating. And he's proving that it works. His podcasts have topped global fiction charts, outranked major studios like Amazon and Apple. All while promoting brands in a way that's fresh and daring and utterly unforgettable. In today's conversation, Ian and I will talk about the leap from West Point, he's a West Point grad, all the way to founder of a media company, and how breaking the rules was a part of his story all along. How fiction podcasts like The Hacker Chronicles and Murder in HR are redefining the limits of B2B marketing. We'll talk about his uphill battle of pitching something that no one has ever done and why Ian's vision kept him going. We'll get into why creativity is the key to just breaking through the noise in today's marketing landscape, something that Ian and I agree on very, very much. And I think you'll see that Ian's story isn't just inspiring, it's actually pretty revolutionary. If you've ever wondered whether you can truly break the mold and redefine an entire industry, this episode is for you. I'm Lindsay Chepkema, and this is Actually I Can. Hi, Ian. See you right when you take a drink of water.
Hey there. I was drinking water, but hydration is key.
Hydration is key. We could talk about that today, but I feel like we have some more exciting things to talk about. So, okay, so you have one of the most fun things about doing the show is that I go into these conversations thinking we're going to talk about one thing, and then I learn all these really cool things about my friends. So I am confident that that will happen again today, because what little I know about you, Ian, is pretty darn interesting. Like from West Point grad to running a very successful, very, very cool, I know that I'm biased because I am a big fan of what you're doing, but very cool company that is, among many other things, producing kind of like blockbuster fiction stories for B2B brands. So I would like you to help me connect those dots. And I'm sure, even just based on outside looking in, that there are some actually I can moments that have happened to you in even just the last few years.
Yeah, so I think the first time I had something like the actually I can moment was more like an actually you should moment, which is kind of funny.
Oh.
So I got out of the military and I was basically in ad sales, and I moved over sort of to the marketing department. I was doing some marketing for this media company, and I wanted to create an event for military veteran founders in the Valley, in Silicon Valley. So basically, the idea there was that I was meeting through all of these meetups and different things. I was meeting all these veteran founders that were super early stage, and the biggest thing that they needed was like getting exposure and then like one-on-one feedback, to their businesses or elite tier investors sort of in the Valley. And so anyways, so I built this
conference. What year was this? Just that we know, like this wasn't like last year. This was like many years ago.
Yeah. So this was in, I think 2016.
Okay. Got it.
Which is, feels like 100 years ago.
It feels like last year, but that's, coming up on a decade.
I know, right?
Weird.
Yeah. So this was like, 2016. So I wanted to build this conference, and basically the sort of the need there was like, I would meet these founders and I would just introduced them to people that I knew in the Valley that specifically that were looking for like additional exposure in their portfolios to like, military veteran founders for reasons of a bunch of different reasons.
Hmm.
Primarily which is that what we saw in the data was that like military veteran founders actually outperformed the market, but we had no like proof of that. We just had like a lot of anecdotal evidence, and then we had a lot of like corporate evidence. So like if you were to look at just specifically like West Point grads, how many West Point grads were like CEOs of Fortune 500 companies compared to the rest of anywhere else? It
Yeah.
was hugely over indexed, and and a bunch of other military veteran founders and CEOs, stuff like that. So the sort of thesis there was like, hey, if we can bring these people who are probably going to get out of the military, go get a random job somewhere, do some stuff, and then they have no tether back to Silicon Valley, we're going to sort of bring them to the Valley for the weekend and sort of and really like hand shake connections to
Hmm.
people that are in their space. So not just like, hey, meet this, angel investor, but like
So
meet
like help
someone
them
who's
build
interested in,
relationships and
yeah,
like, yeah.
healthcare tech or whatever it is. And so anyway, so I did this conference. It was pretty successful. I think we had like 380 people there. So successful. I think we still managed to lose money, but we did that, and then we did another satellite event, and and I remember I was sitting down with one of my mentors, and he was like, Ian, this is all great, but the thing that the veteran ecosystem needs the most is just successful founders. So like, you should just go do that. And it was kind of a wake up call for me, which is I loved that space and I loved supporting other entrepreneurs. Um, but yeah. And I was starting my own thing. So like, I was a founder in a way, and I had co-founders for that organization. But it's, not the same of trying to sort of build a bigger idea. And I knew that I could sort of like start stuff because I'd sort of like always done that in my life with different
Hmm.
things. And I, had started this conference. And so it's like, well, I've already done this sort of once. And so maybe I need to go. But the problem, in that world is, or in the startup world, is like you obviously have to have an idea for something that needs to exist or you think should exist that people want to pay for. Um, and so and anyways, I ended up co-founding a media company, which is like sort of like quote unquote new media, and and heard many things along the 3 years that I was building that. And when I left to make Caspian Studios, my current company, my goal was to I wanted to get to well, first and foremost, I wanted to build like the B2B sort of agency of record for creating podcasts. So
Hmm.
what I felt was a need in the market was that marketers were extremely creative and wanted to do really creative stuff, but they didn't always have the ability to do that stuff.
Yep. Especially when you were getting started, like especially a
Yeah.
few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And like people were making podcasts or series, and we made a bunch of them in my previous company. Um, and some of the stuff that we were making was like I think a little bit more sort of advanced or sort of high concept, but it was not really like systematized or like a process that you sort of like tap in, and 60 days later you get something that's really good. And so I just felt like the need was there in the market. A lot of people were saying like, hey, we really want to build these type of series that you've been building, and so like you should do it. So and a lot of like my advisors and mentors and people like that were like, yeah, this is a good call because people
Hmm.
always want that. So again, a lot of green lights, not a lot of red lights there.
Yeah.
And my goal is like if we could sort of create a best in class sort of quote unquote podcast as a service company to make really good stuff and stop, where people like, and even still today, I mean, 5 years later, like there's so much stuff that is still sort of substandard, I think, in terms of like how big and prestigious a company is, and then their show is still sort of an afterthought.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just felt like there was a huge uh need in the market for someone to be able to get a really high quality show, quickly and into market and working, and it provides sort of all this value, and it's really cool. And the goal there was to say, hey, if we can get to 100 shows that we manage, that like the first sort of 5 years of the business, if we could get like to 100 shows, then we can start branching out into fiction. So that was sort of the goal, is like get to
Okay.
100 shows, branch out into fiction, which is super arbitrary
Yeah.
and a great learning lesson that we
That's
can.
what I want to talk about. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So far, everything you've told us is very interesting. Like you said, a lot of green lights, a lot of like, oh, I'll do this. This makes sense. This makes sense. I'm going to do this. Going to grow on this. I observe something. I see it through. But and so you started Caspian when?
February 2020. So it
2020.
was like right before pandemic.
Great time to start a business.
I
I
know.
mean, but seriously, in podcasting, it kind of did turn
It
out to
ended
be,
up
in
being, yeah,
hindsight.
it's like it ended up being good in a lot of ways, but it also ended up being bad in the other ways, where it's sort of like, uh every every good market, comes with a bad market afterwards. So
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
that's the give and the take there is, which, such
Yeah.
is life.
Like I say, success is a really crappy teacher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That is wholly correct.
It's true. It's very true. Okay, so everything kind of makes sense. Like one might be like, oh wow, from West Point to podcast agency, like this. Okay, cool. I get it. I see it. The fiction thing, though, that I'm really curious about. I've been curious about it since we met. It's one of the reasons that we met. We started businesses kind of around the same time. Casted was April 2019 or February 2020, and you and I both saw this, like what you were just talking about, this wave coming of like this next phase of marketing for B2B, and what at the time was new media, and now it's just media, and media is marketing. Saw that, and you jumped on it, and it's good. Everything's good. At what point, like how far back in all that story that you just told, when did the fiction seed get planted? Was it always there? I mean, were you like in school once upon a time, like writing fiction? Have you always been like really into fiction? I know that like Caspian, there's a very very famous Caspian in
Yeah.
fiction. Like, has that always been there, or did that come up sometime like around the founding of Caspian Studios? Where'd the fiction come
Yeah.
from?
So fiction was sort of always there, but strategically, I went to this talk years ago. This guy Gibson Biddle, he's like the VP of product at Netflix for years and years, or for early days. I forget how long, but anywho,
Hmm.
and he said that uh, you often get you often overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 5, and that's sort of like always stuck with me as a founder. So when I started thinking about Caspian, and I started it by myself, like I quickly had, people that joined the team, many of which, my senior leaders like Kyle and John, and have been here since then. But I started by myself, and uh, which is a weird feeling, which is something I'd never done ever in my life. Like I never
Yeah.
started anything solo. I was always, like Army was always on teams. Obviously, team is like super important in the Army. There's not a lot of me in the Green Machine, uh, and uh, and then previously of my other businesses, I co-founded those as well. And so this was like starting, by myself was really weird. And again, that's like the ultimate, like you tell yourself you just can't do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like every day you wake up and you go, there's no way I can do this alone. Like
Hmm.
there's just no way. And I really had to fight it, especially in the early days. And I kept like grasping at straws of like, oh, maybe I could just like grab this person, or maybe like this person would want to do this thing, or maybe this person would want to do this thing. And ultimately, for me, I just had to do it myself because I had to uh, go after the vision that like I saw really clear, and like sort of be unrelenting and like if I think what I think is going to happen, then I think this company will be really successful, and we can make our customers very happy. But if I don't, then it's sort of just like on me, and that was, I think, like liberating, in a way where I just had never had that level of control ever in my life over anything,
Yeah.
business or career related, and that part is like super scary. But it was really nice to know that sort of, like when you jump without the reserve parachute, that 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 like you just got to make sure that you do it right. So I think I definitely fought that a lot in the early days, and I was super fortunate to have um Kyle Ruska, our chief customer officer. He joined like very soon after starting. I mean, it was a couple of months. Those months feel like years, but
Yeah.
it was pretty soon after that he joined. And so, anyways, we had a really core team, I think, early on, which is
Yeah.
great. But it's that part is super hard, uh, to just start something by yourself, because you just tell yourself you can't do it, and like it just makes it way harder. Like everything, the plus side is you need a lot less money because you don't
Yeah.
need to support anyone else.
Pivoting is super easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but but there's nobody else to sort of share in anything, and ultimately all the decisions are yours. But as a CEO, that's that way anyway. So kind of no
It's
change.
true.
So strategically, when I started the company in 2020, I thought about it as like 5-year chunks. I was like, the first 5 years, I want to be like the best B2B podcast as a service company. And so what Netflix did was, the first 5 years, like, let's be the best DVD by mail. Then the second 5 years was, let's be the best technology delivery of television movies. And then the next 5 years was, let's be the best at original content. So that's what Netflix did.
Hmm.
And so what I wanted to be was, I wanted to be, in the first 5 years, the best B2B podcast service company, because um I felt like the landscape was not a lot of people that were trying to create sort of like premium content. That a
Hmm.
lot of what was out there was, a few different organizations, many, I mean, these who I respect and have made great stuff. There's a few organizations that focus on premium, but they weren't really like B2B native people. Like they didn't
Yeah.
really live that. They were more media organizations that came from radio and places and had
Yeah.
like phenomenal experience there. Um, and when you make a B2B series, like it's part art, but it's also just like part marketing. And
Yeah.
there's sort of, anyways, I just felt like that you really had to be great at both. Like you had to
Yes.
be fully native in understanding how B2B marketing works and like live it and be part of that world. And then also you have to be sort of fluent in uh storytelling. And so
Hmm.
and so the landscape to me was sort of fractured. It was like there was people who like knew B2B marketing or were sort of making shows, and then there was people that sort of like knew show making or radio that didn't really know the B2B side quite as well, or maybe couldn't communicate that part as effectively. And so anyways, I felt like that sort of like we could create a best in breed sort of,
Yeah.
um and I never really even honestly thought about the competitive landscape that much. I just wanted to make something where our customers were super happy,
Yeah.
that they could have a series that does all this stuff. And I figured if we could do that over the course of 5 years, then we can build up enough money. I'm still waiting on that part. Um, but
Yeah,
we,
let me know what enough is. That bar seems to keep, like
yeah,
moving as the dreams get
any
bigger.
money
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah.
Um, but that we could invest enough into, start doing our own series,
Hmm.
original series, and I wanted to do fiction. And the reason for that is, so yeah, you mentioned Caspian Studios. I was a big fan of fiction and fantasy and sci-fi and murder mysteries and all that stuff as a kid. I read a lot. I watched a lot of like movies with my mom. I listened to a lot of radio with my dad. So I had sort of had, um, that piece as a child. I really liked writing. I didn't remember this until recently. I was looking at like my eighth grade, like, what does Ian want to do when he grows up? And it said, and it's like me, I wrote like, I want to be a writer. And I'm like, I don't even remember that. So it's kind
Oh
of
my
adorable
gosh.
that.
Well, as a parent of an eighth grader right now who is obsessed with planes and flying, it'd be interesting to see if later on if he
Right.
comes back and is like, I did want to do this when I was in
Right.
eighth grade.
But I do think that like it, a little bit of sort of manifesting like what I wanted to be. And I was talking to someone recently, I was talking to my college roommate, and he was like, it's crazy that you landed here because like this is you truly like made a company that is your interests like rolled into one.
Hmm.
I always loved marketing when I took business classes in college, like marketing was my favorite subject. You couldn't major in marketing. Otherwise I definitely would have. But I always loved that. And so when I was in Afghanistan, when I was going to Afghanistan, I was like, I'm going to go spend this year there, and I wanted to do two things other than sort of like do my job, accomplish the mission, and I wanted to get back in shape because I just wasn't as good a shape as I wanted to be, and I wanted to write a screenplay, and so
Hmm.
and this is back in 2011, and so I really wanted to learn how to do that, and I had no, I never went to school for this or anything like that, so I just read a million books and I started listening to a million podcasts about screenwriting, about writing, specifically about film and television. And I started writing a screenplay that I think I got like 5 pages into. Uh, and I would write it at night. And it turns out it's not the most creative place to make stuff. So it's pretty
Hmm.
challenging
Yeah.
trying to sit there at night and write a screenplay. And so I sort of just like tabled that thought
Hmm.
for basically like a decade. And so when I started Caspian, um, my thought was like, if we get sort of 5 years of this, experience in sort of like building all these different types of shows, that we could start writing sort of like original fiction. And the thought there was basically, um, it was basically pretty simple, which is we all love fiction. I suppose like, there's people who don't like it, I suppose. And maybe you like, and you only listen to nonfiction stuff or documentaries or whatever it is. But generally speaking, a lot of us like fiction. It's very popular.
Hmm.
And in B2B marketing, to me, it actually made sense why you would want to do it. You get to control the story, you get to create characters, you get to tell stories that are sort of ripped from the headlines. You get to make stuff up to fill in the gaps. Um, you can tell a customer story that doesn't, that they don't want to share publicly. You can do
Yeah.
all these things with fiction. That you can't do when there are actual, then there's actual rules. And to me, fiction is like this logical thing uh that B2B marketers should be doing. And who fundamentally disagreed with that was every single person that I talked to.
I was gonna say, yeah. So like that is one of the like hallmarks of a visionary is like crystal clear in my mind. Literally everyone you tell it to is like, I don't understand. Or no, or you shouldn't, or you can't. Like you can't do that. So
Yeah.
tell me more about that. So it's crystal clear in your mind.
Well,
And
yeah. And
everyone you told said, what?
yeah. And I mean, so I started, and confusion equals no sale. So, like I started talking
Yeah.
to people about fiction um a while back. And when I was at
Before
the
Caspian?
yeah,
Or okay.
well, before Caspian, we were doing sort of historical fiction. So
Okay.
we had a podcast where we were doing sort of narrated stories of people who changed the world,
Hmm.
and it had a corporate sponsor, and we had some big A-list actors that are doing the narration of this, and so that was my first way of sort of like cutting my teeth in this type of storytelling, specifically for audio. It was very much an homage to um, the rest of the story. which is a very famous radio program that was syndicated for a long time. It was like one of my favorites when I was a kid, and I always loved listening to that with my dad. And so, we had made this thing, and people really liked it. And most of all, like, I really liked it. Like,
Hmm.
I really loved listening to these stories that we would make. I loved writing them. And people would be like, this is really cool. And we had a newsletter and stuff, and it was really interesting. And historical fiction is fun because you can sort of, dramatize it, right? So,
Yeah.
these sort of like mini biopics, right? Is what we're doing. And yeah, and it just really struck me that that just this type of narrative storytelling, which like nobody in B2B was doing. And I
Yeah.
remember pitching Salesforce on this years ago, and showing them like, hey, here's the success of this newsletter that we've been writing in this format. Here's the success of the rest of the story. Mike Rowe has a podcast called The Way I Heard It. Um, like this type of story is super evergreen. We're telling stories of famous people. It's ingrained in sort of like the Salesforce values.
Yeah.
We're going to tell diverse stories. We're going to do all this stuff. Um, yeah, and shout out to the people at the team for saying like, you know what, hey, we'll do this. And I remember um, one of the people was like, hey, we have a quote to sponsor Gladwell's podcast, and it's for 10 times more money. And so like, we'll try this. And anyways, it was crazy successful. We got like, best of 2018 from Apple. Um uh and it was super successful. So anyways, I'd done that type of storytelling before, not fiction, but dramatized sort of versions of it. Not wholly like I'm
Yeah.
doing now, but
We were
it
able
was
to like see it come to life and kind of like start to take context in a B2B setting. Like, do you think that's what kind of help it cross the barrier of like this is a thing, like this is a thing that could actually be
like
done?
sort of,
Yeah.
but to me it always made perfect sense in my mind. It still makes perfect sense in my mind whenever I pitch, any of the stuff that we're working on. And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it makes no sense in the other person's mind. So, so I think that is part of the process. Is like I mean, part of with us with podcast as a service, with all of this, is like just make it as easy as possible to buy and as simple to understand what you're trying to do. When in reality, the thing that you're selling is incredibly complex. Like making a series is incredibly complex, and I think you try to like find comps for this. You're like when someone pitched the first like Dreamforce, right? Like that was a crazy idea then too, right? Anyway, so
Yeah.
there's all sorts of crazy ideas that like, hey, we're going to bring in all these people together. It's going to cost a ton of money. It's going to, do all this. We're also going to make it a rock concert, and we're going to bring in bands, and we're
It's
going to do
never
things.
been done before. We don't know if it's going to work, but we're pretty sure that enough people are going to like it to make it make sense.
Yeah, yeah, and it's going to
Hmm.
cost us an absolute ton of money.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so flash forward to we're 2 years into Caspian, and I just have a doc, of running ideas on my computer of stories that I wanted to tell, like fiction stories that like
Hmm.
someday I wanted to make these. And so I met a CMO, or I knew a CMO, and I caught up with her and I was like, "Hey, I have this cybercrime thriller that I like have a pitch for if you ever want to see it." And she was like, "Oh, we just acquired this company and they're like super creative, and so you should talk to them." So, anyways, CMO ends up changing, talk to the new CMO, and he's like, hey, you should talk to, or no, she was like, hey, you should talk to our new CMO. Talk to the new CMO. He's like, hey, you should talk to this company we just acquired. So I meet these folks at Tenable that these guys, Jerome and Skylar, and and they're like, hey, we have this idea for this story, for this novella that we're writing. And I was like, hey, why don't we make it a podcast? Um, and so, and there was definitely like wires crossed, which is
Uh-huh.
hilarious. They thought we were going to make an audiobook of the novella.
Oh.
And then, so I was pitching like a dramatized series, right?
Hmm.
They were like, oh, let's do like, turn this into an audiobook.
Uh-huh.
And so, anyway, so it really was actually an adaptation of a novella that they wrote. Um, and then we turned it into something completely different, which is not the story is different, but into like an actual, into a screenplay, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Into essentially like borderline like a TV show, right?
Yeah.
But just for audio. And once we got into the process there, and that show did really well. So that process is like super crazy. We get into it, we do all the stuff, we do all the recording. It's this like really cool story about a gal who's a barista, and she has all the student debt, and her roommate's super annoying, and she needs money, and she just she's an aspiring pianist, and she gets basically turned down for this piano thing. She needs money, and so she turns to the dark web and goes and buys like a $500 malware kit, and decides to do her first cybercrime, and ends up kind of getting good at it, and then all this crazy stuff happens. And so we told this story, and it was super popular. It got really big. Um, and cybersecurity people loved it. We had like real stuff from actual cybersecurity in there. So we had like a technical consultant, we had all this stuff, and it was really popular, really successful. I think it had, I forget the exact numbers, but like well over 500,000 people listened in the first season. Um, and
I mean, that's just a second. We're talking B2B.
yeah,
I mean, like let's like oversimplify it. We're talking about B2B content marketing, right? Like oversimplifying with over 500,000 engagements, like in B2B speak. Like that's insane.
yeah,
And there are people saying like, no, content marketing doesn't work. Making a media company doesn't work. Like it's too long. It's too fluffy. It's thought leadership doesn't lead to sales. Like that's just like worth pausing and just saying, okay, we told a
yeah,
story and it engaged 500,000 people.
yeah. It was super
Period.
crazy. It was super crazy. And also, the big risk that everybody thought was the big risk was we were telling an empathetic look at a hacker, right?
Right.
This is the bad guy.
Hmm.
And she is doing things for her own reasons, but it doesn't matter. She's breaking the law, and she's like hurting other people
Hmm.
unequivocally, right? And again, it showed like struggles and what she was going through and all this stuff. It's really cool. Um, and Yeah, that's not always the best look for a cybersecurity company in some people's
Hmm.
mind. So
Hmm.
that was sort of a big that we everyone was like really worried that people would be like, "Why did you tell this story?" And you know what? Nobody cared. Nobody cared at all, despite how much we were worried about it, despite you know, spending all quote unquote all the money, which was like incredibly cheap and still is cheap to make fiction stuff, even though people think it's like crazy expensive, but it's actually not. And we got all this success, and we were getting screenshots of people that were like, "Oh my gosh, someone tried to, do XYZ. This is just like in the podcast." So we're getting like really good feedback from the market on it. Um, and and I think that, from that you go, "Oh, fiction works," right? Which the funny thing is, of course fiction works. Like Hollywood wouldn't exist if fiction
Yeah.
didn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's an industry that, makes whatever, $100 billion a year. Like we know that it works. So the question is never if it works. The question is, do you have a story that's good enough to make
Make
it
it.
work? And then do you have an ability to connect that to the other objectives that you want on your marketing team?
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And so we
yeah.
come up with this, and then we say, hey, uh, and people are like, yeah, that's cool. And, it won a bunch of awards, and we're like, that's cool. Um, And so then I go to everybody and I go, "Hey, I made this hit show. Our company made this hit show, The Hacker Chronicles. We want to do another one of these. But it's going to be very different. It's going to be a murder mystery. It's going to be set in HR." And everybody said no. And everybody was like, what I got over and over and over was like, "That's kind of crazy. Yeah, good luck with that." Just like, you know, nobody wanted a piece of it. And
Hmm.
not just that, but we pitched a bunch of different genres. So we had a bunch of different pitches for sales, for marketing, for IT, for all this stuff, for any different persona out there, and like nothing but no's. and I sent it over to Ryan Benici, who was the CMO of Gympass at
Mm-hmm.
the time, and he was like,
Who
oh,
gets
I think I caught up with
storytelling
him on a
like
what's that?
way, way back. Like I mean, his roots are deep in B2B storytelling
Yeah,
and
and
content.
storytelling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was like, hey, I this is cool. Like, come pitch our team. And so we end up meeting with the team, and there's a guy there named Christopher Dean who's amazing, and we ended up sort of like working with them and pitching them this idea of a murder mystery, uh, set in an HR department. So it was like a propulsive story that you had to listen to the end, and that there's like a big twist in episode 2 is that it's not actually it seems like a tech startup, but it's actually a front for a company of assassins. And the whole idea there was that we wanted to discuss toxicity at startups and in big companies, and that
Mm-hmm.
like what is the antidote to toxicity, was like a big theme of the show. It was like, we spend all of our life at work, and like you should not have to spend it with people who are a-holes, right? Like, um so how do we do that? And Gympass, who's now WellHub, their piece into this was like they wanted to promote wellness and like shine the light on different, wellness activities that you could do to fight toxicity. And anyway, so we had this really cool story, and we wrote it. We brought on a screenwriter, and I co-wrote it with this guy Taylor Sardoni, and Jazz Spados was on our team, and wrote this really cool story that we felt really good about. Went through a lot of trials and tribulations along the way. Casted it. We got an amazing cast. And we had this sponsor in Gympass, who was, really proud to be a sponsor of the content and
Mm-hmm.
wanted to share this with their audience. And so we launched that show. It goes absolutely bananas. We get,
Absolutely bananas. Like it was
yeah,
insane. It like won all the awards. It was everywhere. It was like
yeah.
top of all the things. Yes.
Yeah, so we got featured. We were like the number one podcast featured in on Apple Podcasts, the number one podcast featured on like Overcast, on Pocket Casts. We hit like number one in fiction. I think we were up to like, I forget the exact number, but it was like 46 in the world for a little bit.
So
Um,
your B2B focused, you're like essentially B2B podcast was number one in fiction, not fiction for B2B because that category didn't exist,
yeah,
just in fiction in
yeah,
general.
and
Hmm.
like the other studios that are like in that category are like Amazon,
Insane. Yeah. Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Like names that you know for their original movie content. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, who
crazy.
are like incubating IP for film and television,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and we're talking about, tech startups, and we're talking about, HR stuff, and there's all these like HR, you know, lessons and all this stuff in there. And yeah, and we had this like A-list cast and all this stuff. And so after that you're like, oh, this is a huge success. And then we go out and we're like, surely everyone is going to be beating down our door now,
Hmm.
to do this type of stuff. And again, the same thing happened. It's just like a lot of like, well, I don't know. Stuff gets sent to, the executive team, and they say, I don't know how it's connected. Had someone say like, maybe it's too successful. I've never heard that one.
What?
Yep. Got a too
Okay.
successful,
Okay. Okay.
which is a weird one. But
Yeah.
their point was basically like, well, is our target audience,
Hmm.
is if you're getting more people than that, to which I say, well, if the content is so good that other people want to consume it, then chances are the target audience is really, really happy with it too,
Yeah.
because it's good enough for anybody.
Right.
Which, like, again, bears out in the numbers. It bears out, engagement. One of the things that happened with Murder in HR is the Boston HR Council, who's like an independent group, nothing to do with this. They reach out to us and they're like, we want to host a premiere event for season 2. So like stuff like that, one of my favorite stories is I was talking to a mom who happens to be a chief people officer, and she was like, "Hey, my daughter and I love Only Murders in the Building. We watch it together."
Love
And
that
I was
show
like, "I
so
think you're gonna
much.
like this." Yeah, I know, it's so great. And I think that you're gonna like this podcast. And so we listened to it like on the way up to Tahoe. She's like, she's like, my daughter loved it. At the end of it, She was like, ask me questions about my work. And she's like, she never asks about my work. So, just the fact that like we could create a moment of connection with a chief people officer of a big company and a daughter and her daughter to talk about work for a fraction of a second is
Right.
like this like storytelling is, the way in, right? And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, so again, with all the success with now we have this like big event, we have all this stuff, like again, surely everybody would be interested.
Of course,
Um,
surely.
yeah, and then there's more crickets or there's budget stuff or whatever. Um, and then we found the great people at Thoropass, and then we launched our new show, Scam Hunters, which is starring Greg Kinnear and Aaron Moriarty, and is an absolutely amazing, amazing show.
Well, because that's the thing that you glossed over a little bit. You said we got a really great cast. We got these A-listers. Now you have some names. Like, I think that was a big part of it too, is that
Right.
you weren't afraid to make it big. Like, you weren't afraid to be audacious enough to go get like real, actual actors, like known names of people that you see in shows and movies. Like, you didn't just get voiceover artists who are wonderful human beings, but
Yeah.
you got actual known actors and like known talent like that. I think that's really huge too.
Yeah, and like they're great. They are such professionals, and they make content so much better. And like you just like that you need to chase greatness with this
Hmm.
stuff. Like that is the stuff that escapes. And
Hmm.
like we fight so hard in marketing to get these like really small wins when it's
Yes.
like it's just as much work to go make a huge win. Like it's definitely hard to do this stuff, but it's not that much harder than
Hmm.
anything else that we do in marketing. But we're just, your total addressable audience or whatever you want to say is so much bigger when you're trying to make a hit and like really penetrate, your market. And I think people are just scared of the unknown, but I think that, fiction storytelling is like so incredibly powerful. Like 0.1% of people are doing this in B2B, and it makes no
Hmm.
sense to me. I'm not saying every single company needs to do
Right.
it, but like you should tell some fiction stories. And I'll leave you with a number here. So might be these are general numbers. I don't know the exact numbers right this second, but Hollywood spends about $80 billion a year on content. B2B marketing spends $40 billion on B2B marketing. So if you just think about it,
That's bananas.
right? So you're like, or B2B companies spend that on marketing. So if you're like, if we could just take 0.1% of B2B marketing budgets and make fictional content, right? Like we could fuel half of Hollywood a year, right? We could make Stranger Things. We could make like
Only murders in the building.
we can make Only Murders in the Middle. We could make Marvel movie.
Hmm.
I mean, not with Marvel IP, but like you could make a
Yeah.
superhero movie. You could
Yeah.
make $100 million superhero movie. Now I know it's not like, it's not all concentrated, but Hollywood's not concentrated. That's a bunch of different studios. So just the idea that we are only constrained by shackles we put on ourselves.
Hmm.
Our audiences deserve better stuff. Unequivocally, they deserve better stuff. They are not getting good enough stuff. I saw a stat the other day. It said there's a CMO. They'd made 7,000 white papers last year. Uh,
Last year, just in 1 year.
63 of them got over 10 views. So, like, this is the state of B2B marketing, right? We're
Yeah.
trotting out the same stuff over and over and over again, and nobody wants that stuff. And you could
And
say,
nobody
like,
wants to make it either.
yeah, no, that's what I mean. Nobody wants to make it. Nobody wants to create that. I don't want to
No,
create
yeah.
that. Whereas when I sit on a call with a bunch of marketers and we're making something that's fiction, people are freaking excited. It's like palpable. They're like so pumped to be part of something like this. And so it's just like it to me, and it doesn't have to be like a fiction podcast. It could be anything. It could be mockumentary. It could be a comic book series. It could be, whatever. The sky's the limit. It could be a TikTok series. It could be whatever. But creating characters that have an arc, that have stories that connect this stuff into the human side of the world. Not just your work, but like what happens after you get home from work, what happens at the conference, what happens when, you make an enemy at work or a frenemy or all these things. Like there's a million things that we could be talking about. And, and that's what I know that marketers want to be more creative. Yes. But also audiences demand us to be more creative.
Yes.
And otherwise they won't consume. So like they just won't pay attention. So if you're just doing the same old stuff, like they just, it's not going to work.
And the answer is not in doing the same old stuff faster, cheaper with AI. I'm sorry. It's not. I'm not sorry, actually. It's not making like 7,000 white papers. I mean, like the answer is not to make 7 million next year. It's to do something different, and it's to get more creative, and it's to leverage your human brain to connect with the human brains of your audience in ways that are actually enriching and rewarding for both sides.
Agreed.
So
Thanks, Lindsay.
okay. Well, thank you. This was amazing. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm glad that you actually did start a company that makes fiction blockbuster hits for B2B.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Actually, I Can. And did you know that actually you can subscribe so that you never miss an episode? Yeah, do it now. And you can also go to actuallyican.show and watch any episode anytime. Thanks for joining.